Welcome. We're filming live in a local studio here in downtown Fresno. So the background's a little bit different. With us today, we were able to get a few answers from Professor Michael Neblo. He's the professor of political science at Ohio State University. We're not always able to get people to do a full interview, so we appreciate whatever we can get. Let's take a look at the professor right now. Michael Neblo, professor of political science at Ohio State University. Neblo's research focuses on deliberative democracy and political psychology. His most recent book, Politics with the People, Building a Direct Representative Democracy, develops and tests a new model of politics connecting citizens and elected officials to improve representative government. He was invited to testify before Congress about these findings. His first book, Deliberative Democracy Between Theory and Practice, cut across the deadlock between supporters of deliberative theory and their empirical critics by focusing on the core goals of the larger deliberative political system. His work has appeared in is forthcoming in a wide range of academic journals, including Science, the American Political Science Review, Proceedings of the National Academy of Science, the American Journal of Political Science, the Journal of Political Philosophy, Political Analysis, Public Opinion Quarterly, Perspectives on Politics, Political Communication, Social Science and Medicine, among many others. This is how we found him. The impact of voter turnout on polarization. Will increasing turnout, so everyone votes, reduce polarization, extreme partisanship? And this was specifically the essay he wrote or interview he did. Engaging constituents is essential to depolarizing Congress. Professor of Philosophy, Communication, Public Policy. Political extremism and polarization are at their highest levels in over a century, while civic participation plus trust and approval of Congress are at near all-time lows. Gridlock, obstruction, and resistance are now normal at a time when the country faces crucial problems requiring action. People wonder if the country could ever again veer into civil war or if we're already in a cold one. Direct solutions such as depolarizing the partisan wings are likely impossible in this age of fragmented media, while creating more competitive congressional districts requires those who've been elected on one set of rules to change them. Rather than thinking outside of the box, a more viable solution is making the box bigger, increasing new voter turnout to shift political incentives, driving political polarization. I will point out a lot of political science studies have said that the more engaged you get voters in politics, the more likely they are to become polarized. So this idea of just getting more people in and we're going to have more people participate in the vote and that'll reduce polarization is not true. The more active people get in, the more polarized they become. There is an exception when we look at the Australian law requiring everybody to vote. In that situation, they're not encouraging people to vote. You're required to vote. So people may not donate or volunteer or really care, but they do go out and vote. That does seem to produce some moderation, but that is a law forcing everyone to vote. It is not a program to encourage more people to vote. Two wildly different things. So I talked to the professor briefly on the internet and I said, I have two questions. Would you be willing to answer? And he said, sure. So do you think polarization will calm down on its own naturally? Was the first question. I asked this question a lot of professors, especially if we don't have a whole lot of time. I ask them, do you think it's going to get better? I do think the current intensity will calm down somewhat on its own given enough time. That said, I don't think we should rest satisfied with somewhat, and I don't think that we should wait around for enough time to elapse when we have good strategies to help with partisan effective polarization. So he does think it will calm down somewhat, but why wait and why wait until it's done and why say, oh, it's good enough? Because even if it calms down somewhat on its own, it's not going to solve the problem, is what he's saying. I say effective because in my view, polarization over normal political disagreement, while not always a positively good thing, is not nearly as corrosive as effective polarization. We've talked about that a lot here. Our democracy can handle sharp disagreements over policy. It is much more dangerous, however, if we hate and lack trust in each other. In the later case, it is hard to compromise and we are tempted to violate the rules in order to protect against our enemies, as opposed to taking turns in power with our political opponents. So we've talked about how the key to polarization being fixed is good losers, people who are okay with losing, instead of people who say, well, if we lose, the enemy won and it's the end of America. He was saying we've got to get rid of that attitude to reduce effective polarization. And again, while saying, yeah, I think it will decrease some, but somewhat, which is not fixing it, he admits. And how long is given enough time? What does that mean? And do we need to wait that long? If we have everyone engaging each other to reduce polarization, how long will it take for us as a society to fix the problem? To be clear, I'm not in favor of everyone engaging with each other over everything. Some disagreements are best left in the backyard if they don't interfere with our ability to live together in peace and prosperity. As my mom always said, don't borrow trouble. Moreover, just engaging any which way isn't going to solve the problem either. We have to engage in the right way about the right things. That's what I've been saying, so this is good. The right way will vary by context, issue, and community. For example, the challenges facing members of Congress in engaging each other over the federal deficit are different from neighbors on a city block engaging over how to deal with drug dealers in their area. That's for how long things will take. I prefer to think of this as an ongoing process. Each generation has to renew the bonds of civic cooperation as new voters become enfranchised and others die off. And we need to adapt to new challenges, the effects of climate change, whether it is human-induced or natural phenomenon. That said, I'm hopeful that with a little bit of goodwill and a bit of hard work, we can repair the torn fabric of our political culture. As bad as things are right now, they're not as bad as they were in the lead up to and the aftermath of the Civil War. Not sure I agree with that. Look at Bleeding Kansas. America's greatest days so far were still ahead when things looked incredibly bleak back then. So if our forebears were able to come back together for the most part, we can too. I think we can make non-trivial gains in the short run by changing some of our institutions and practices along the lines that I described in the article you read, in the medium run through education, and in the long run through generational replacement. So generational replacement means it's going to take generations to fix this. And his idea of, well, you know, we went through the Civil War and we survived. Well, let's talk about that. So in the Civil War, you had, I don't know, 500,000-600,000 people die. So it was a massive thing. You also had basically the lost generation. So after the Civil War ended, you had a period of malaise where people didn't really do anything. They weren't happy. They weren't participating in culture or civic life, and also a period of intense depression that lasted 20 years. So 2 decades after. It didn't snap back together. It was the Civil War, and then society was kind of crushed on both sides and the economy for 2 decades. Additionally, I would argue they never came back together. I have family in Texas. They're still upset about the Civil War. And when we look at the most incidences of racism against Black people, guess where they are? In the South, the Confederacy that lost the Civil War. So we're supposed to fight the Civil War to free the Blacks. How come Black people have it the worst in the South, the former Confederacy, than anywhere in America if we actually won the war and we all came back together again? Also, I disagree. Bleeding Kansas looks like now, and it was the precedent to the Civil War. But maybe things will calm down in a little bit on their own. However, I totally agree. What's enough time to do that? And what does somewhat calm down get us? The level of polarization with the Barack Obama and the Tea Party, where we couldn't pass a budget and the World Bank collapsed our financial credit rating? That's not super great either. We'll leave it there. Thanks for checking out. We'll be back soon.